In the quiet town of Eldritch Falls, the autumn leaves whispered secrets as they skittered across the cobblestones, their rustling forming a hushed chorus under the wan moonlight. It was in this old town, filled with whispered legends and obscured by the fog of forgotten histories, that Julia and Martin moved into the Victorian apartment at the end of Crow Street. The building, a towering edifice of dark brick. Julia, with her keen interest in the town's arcane past, and Martin, a writer whose imagination feasted on such Gothic settings, were immediately drawn to the apartment's antique charm. It was perfect, or so it seemed, with its high ceilings, ornate woodwork, and an eerie, magnetic pull that both unsettled and enticed. As they settled in, the couple noticed peculiarities about their new home. The first of these was the silence, a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed almost tangible. The second was the chill that clung to the air, seeping through the thick walls despite the warmth of the late summer evenings. One night, as they lay in bed, the stillness of their room was broken by a soft, indistinct whispering. It seemed to emanate from the vents that dotted the walls, old and ornate, framed with intricate latticework. At first, they thought it was the wind, or perhaps their own imaginations fueled by the ghost stories they had chuckled over during their unpacking. But as nights turned into weeks, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and unmistakably human. Curiosity melded with unease as Martin and Julia tried to trace the source. There were no apartments above or below, only theirs, awkwardly placed as if the building itself had been designed around it. The landlord, a reclusive elderly gentleman named Mr. Cromwell, claimed ignorance with a dismissive wave of his hand, his eyes darting nervously. The whispers varied, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. Words were indistinguishable, yet their tone conveyed emotions that were unsettlingly familiar. Julia, a psychologist by training, found herself drawn to these disembodied voices, her professional intrigue battling with a gnawing fear. Martin, however, began to withdraw, his initial fascination replaced by a haunted look. His nights were consumed by writing, his days by silence. Determined to understand the phenomenon, Julia conducted experiments. She recorded the whispers, played them back at different speeds, but the voices eluded comprehension. The more she listened, the more personal the voices seemed to become, as if they knew her, as if they were talking to her. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Julia sat listening to the whispers when she realized the voices had changed. They were clearer, more coherent, and they were calling her name. "Julia, help us," they pleaded. "Don't let him hear." Chilled to the bone, Julia sought out Martin, who was pale, his eyes wild. He had heard them too. Not just the whispers, no. He had heard a voice clearly, distinctly, not from the vents, but right beside him, as if someone unseen were in the room. It had whispered a dire warning: leave, or stay forever. The couple decided to confront Mr. Cromwell. Under the pressure of their fears and insistence, the old man's facade crumbled. He confessed that the apartment had been sealed off for decades, ever since a tragedy that the town no longer spoke of. The previous occupants, a family, had perished under mysterious circumstances. Their deaths had been sudden, violent, and unexplained. Ever since, their spirits had been rumored to inhabit the building, trapped and anguished. Horrified but determined to find peace for these lost souls, Julia and Martin researched the building's history, poring over old newspapers and public records. They unearthed a chilling tale of betrayal and murder, where a man, driven by jealousy, had killed his family, believing his wife had been unfaithful. The whispers were their voices, trapped in the limbo of their unavenged death. The couple contacted a medium, hoping to facilitate a communication or a passage for these spirits. The séance was held on a stormy night, where the wind itself seemed to echo the cries of the lost. As candles flickered, forming shadows that danced upon the walls, the medium summoned the spirits. The air grew thick, the temperature dropped, and a suffocating pressure filled the room. The voices in the vents surged to a deafening roar before the medium, pale and trembling, declared a presence too malevolent to confront. She urged them to leave, but Julia and Martin could not, would not. They felt an obligation to these souls, whose lives had been so brutally cut short. With renewed determination, they delved deeper, uncovering the dark heart of the tragedy. The murderer, it turned out, armed with this knowledge, they approached the spirits again, this time alone. Julia spoke directly to them, her voice steady but compassionate. "We know your pain," she said. "We know who did this to you. We can help you find peace. But you must let go of this place. The atmosphere shifted, the oppressive air lifting slightly. The whispers morphed into a single, clear voice, that of the mother. "Protect my children," it implored. "Free us from him." Martin and Julia promised to do so, feeling a powerful surge of energy as the spirits, finally acknowledged and understood, began to fade. The whispering ceased, the air cleared, and for the first time since moving in, the apartment was silent. But the silence was short-lived. In the days that followed, the couple felt an unnerving sense of being watched. Objects moved of their own accord, shadows flickered at the corners of their vision, and a cold hostility pervaded their home. It became apparent that the malevolent spirit, the murderer, had remained. Faced with a presence too powerful and too evil to dispel, Julia and Martin made the difficult decision to leave. They moved out of the apartment, leaving behind the dark history it held. But even as they settled into a new life, the whispering never quite left them. In quiet moments, in the soft rustling of the wind, they would sometimes hear it, a faint, sorrowful whisper, a reminder of the souls they had tried to help, and the darkness that lingered in that old building on Crow Street.